Good evening. I'm Rebecca Butler, Executive Director of Museums and Galleries Queensland. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners on the land and waters on which we work and meet across Queensland. Tonight's event is being presented from M&G Brisbane, the lands of the Yugara and Turrbal peoples. We pay our respect to elders past, present and emerging. On behalf of Museums and Galleries Queensland's board and staff, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the 2021 Gallery and Museum Achievement Awards. This year is our first virtual GAMAA event, and we hope that you enjoy being part of tonight's presentations. The GAMAA are presented by Museums and Galleries Queensland each year to honour the achievements of Queensland individuals and institutions in striving towards excellence. The 2021 judging panel had the unenviable task of selecting the award recipients from the remarkable group of nominations received. To the judges, Michelle Blair, Suzanne Gibson and Rebecca McDuff, we thank you for your contribution and the great job you've done. This evening, we will be making presentations to the winners and shortlisted finalists in 6 major categories, 4 organisational and 2 individual categories. This year's beautiful GAMAA trophies were created by artist Michelle Yateman. We thank Michelle and Yarrabah Arts and Cultural Precinct, Far North Queensland, especially Simone, for their assistance in providing these stunning artworks. Museums and Galleries Queensland also sincerely thanks Public Galleries Queensland and Australia Museums and Galleries Association Queensland for sponsoring our 2021 trophies. Our first category award is for individuals paid staff. The judging panel shortlisted 2 finalists in this category. They are Captain Adele Katz, Army Museum, South Queensland, and Billy Joe Ogilvie, Artspace Mackay. And the winner is Captain Adele Katz, Army Museum, South Queensland.
My name is Captain Adele Katz, and I am currently the curator at Army Museum South Queensland, located at Victoria Barracks, Brisbane. I started in the Army Reserve over 40 years ago when I enlisted in the Women's Royal Australian Army Corps. I first started my Army career as a truck driver, but I also had a love of history. I then posted back up to Queensland and I worked at the 2nd 14th Light Horse Regiment, Queensland Mounted Infantry, and I was there for 18 years. In the role in that museum, we certainly sorted out an amazing collection that had been there collected by previous curators. And we managed to expand the museum into a larger space and conduct tours. And so that was my first foray into working with people in Brisbane that had an interest in military and wanted to come and see a military museum. About 8 years ago, in July 2013, I was posted to Army Museum South Queensland, which is at Victoria Barracks, Brisbane. And I occupied the role of museum manager there for 6.5 years. And then more recently, I have taken back on the role of curator. Whilst at Army Museum South Queensland in Victoria Barracks, Brisbane, we certainly have had a focus of trying to bring the public back into Victoria Barracks and to tell some of the wonderful stories that exist in the military in Victoria Barracks and all of South Queensland. I work with an amazing dedicated team of volunteers. When I first started the museum, we had 2 people as our volunteers. So we've actually grown that to well over 36 people. And it's an amazing, diverse collection and a really wonderful team. So working as the curator, I have tried to put on different exhibitions that tell slightly different stories, all focused around South Queensland. Working with our volunteers, my main goal has been to engage them in part of this history, but also to facilitate their upskilling. If we have a dedicated team of volunteers that are increasing in their skill level, then the standard of our exhibitions will just continue to improve.
Our congratulations to Adele and also to Billy Joe for being shortlisted as a finalist. Our second category award is for Individuals Volunteer. The judging panel chose to shortlist only one finalist in this category, and the winner is Jill Holgriff from Girl Guides Queensland Archive.
I was working on the loan guide history, our correspondence girls, and I wanted to get a photograph of the first commissioner, so the equivalent of that state commissioner, and she's another one who was associated with that family. So she was able to, what happened was I went and looked in the electoral rolls to see when her name stopped appearing, and then I went to the State Library and looked up her death, found the will, went out to the State Archives, looked up the will, so I went the rounds of all those establishments, and I wrote to this next of kin, and a photograph turned up in the mail, and she told me about how they called her May, M-A-I, and it made it a real person, It was so exciting, and I just, from there, I got really into it. When I went for that community heritage grant, I had an ulterior motive. I wanted to go to the workshop. That was what I really wanted out of it. And I've learned such a lot. And through Brisbane Living Heritage and Museum and Galleries Queensland, the opportunities I've had to, more workshops, it just keeps me going, because I'm learning something all the time, and I think, oh yes, got to do that. See, by going to that workshop in Canberra, that started me off with best practices. So cleaning a book, and I worked out that I'd spend an hour. If a book was donated, I want to see if we need it, check the pages to see there's no damage, clean the pages, grate my rubber and little pad and pad the pages, and enter it all in the database, put a number on it, get a proper storage box for it, or make one if necessary, if they're large. Well, an hour for one thing, that's a bit challenging. Whenever I learn something new, I have a try. But, it intrigues me.
Congratulations, Jill. We now move to the Organisation Awards, and I would like to introduce Andrew Moritz, who is a member of Museums and Galleries Queensland's board, to present the next two categories.
Thank you, Rebecca. I have great pleasure in presenting the award for projects by organisations with paid staff. The judging panel shortlisted 5 finalists in this highly contested category, and these finalists are Artspace Mackay for their project Ron McBurney in Search of Arcadia Artist in Residence program, Museum of Brisbane for their Bauhaus Now exhibition, the Noosa Regional Gallery for Floating Land Point to Point, Queensland Museum for I Do Wedding Stories from Queensland, Umbrella Studio Contemporary Arts for their exhibition Legacy Reflections on Mabo. And the winner of this award is Umbrella Studio Contemporary Arts for Legacy Reflections on Mabo.
Hi, my name's Gail Mabo. I'm the daughter of Eddie and Benita Mabo, and one of the people who had a weird idea to actually do an exhibition about Mabo and invite some fantastic artists to actually be part of, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous, just to see what they thought of my dad.
My name's Kelly Williams. I, until recently, was the director of Umbrella Studio Contemporary Arts, which was the role I was in when Gail and I worked together on this amazing project. Mm-hmm. Where did it come from? This idea actually preceded me. So there's a third curator that joined Gail and I on this project, and his name's Dr. Jonathan McBurney. And he was the director of Umbrella Studio Contemporary Arts before I was. And he and Gail dreamt up this incredible idea, curatorial premise, as Gail said, to celebrate her dad and his legacy from a perspective that hasn't been done before. And so, yeah, they kicked off the whole concept, and then Gail and I read it all and further refined the project. So in the end, there were 25 artists from around Australia who were invited to participate, and the entire curatorial premise was guided by Gail. It's the most significant exhibition that's ever celebrated your dad, Gail.
Yeah, well, see, with what I was doing and what I wanted to achieve was just the fact that I knew of my dad's great history and, what he did for many people, along his journey. And one of the things is people only knew his name as that person who was in the news for a little while. They actually didn't understand the background of who he was, where he came from, the island he came from, the passion he had about wanting to, undo a wrong. And so for me, when he was fighting for his land, I'm all of 15. So I don't know what the hell's going on. So think about 15-year-olds now. They don't know what is Mabo? I don't know. Then if they're doing legal studies, then they learn a little bit about it. But otherwise, they don't know. And Australians who knew of the fight didn't know of the man. And so what Legacy did was fill that void between hearing the name and understanding who the man was. And through all the works that were put out there, I mean, for me, when I went to Bundaberg for their exhibition opening, it was like revisiting old friends, walking into that room, seeing all those beautiful works. And I could feel dad there. And so for me, it was that room still lived and breathed dad with all of those works. And so that's what I wanted people to have a sense of, the grandeur of who he was as a man. And for me, that is and was the best thing about the Legacy exhibition was it brought him alive. It kept him alive for people to actually understand who he was. And so when I had that whole concept, because I was standing at CIAF, we were at CIAF, so the Cairns Indigenous Art Fair on the 25th anniversary, because they invited me to do my own exhibition about, how do I see my dad? And I'm like, interesting. Interesting you say that concept. And I went like, well, how do other artists see my dad? And I said, especially mainstream artists, because I know who he is, and a lot of other people know who he is, but what do they really know about him? Well, how do they feel about him and what he's done? If they to research him, what would they come up with? And that's where, with Legacy, was part of that, just them giving them a magic box to open up to find all these magic things about who this man was, and finding those little things that they could connect to, that they made their own. And for me, they found their own Mabo.
That it is about inclusivity, and it's about leading the way through example and not censoring what people have to say, and allowing those artists to have access and go through some of your dad's very personal belongings, items, like through a digital version. We created an entire website with all of these images and sounds and writing uploaded for the artists to access and be inspired by. And then they were allowed to create works that express their own experience of Mabo, whatever that meant.
That's right.
And
and for me, it was that whole thing of not, if you put them into a box and sort of go, okay, this is what the title is, so therefore just stick with that, it would have been completely different. But because, I wanted them to just explore him completely. It was just giving them access to being free to think for themselves, because that's what Mabo is. Mabo was a thing to change people's thinking, because as Dad said, the change that were around people's minds about how Australia was founded was broken. And so their minds were freed. And that's what I wanted them to experience, was being free to actually explore their own rights to find out who Mabo was.
Congratulations to Umbrella Studio and to all the finalists. Our next category is for projects by organisations that are volunteer run. The judging panel had another difficult job in selecting from the many nominations in this category and chose 4 finalists, and these are Gladstone Maritime Museum for their project Relocation of the Museum to East Shores Parklands, Ingham Family History Association in partnership with Sandy Robb, History and Heritage Consultant, for their project Rediscovering Book Tea, Chinese Settlers in the Lower Herbert River, Queensland Women's Historical Association for High Society, 1860 to 1960, an exhibition of evening attire worn to theatrical and social events in early Brisbane, Wondai Regional Art Gallery for their gallery extensions, and the winner is Ingham Family History Association in partnership with Sandy Robb for Rediscovering Book Tea, Chinese Settlers in the Lower Herbert River.
In 2018, our president was doing her family history and she discovered that she had Chinese ancestors. We were all rather amazed and decided to look into it, and we looked into the Chinese of the district and we found a huge amount of information, and so we decided this would be a good project to go ahead with. We decided that we really didn't know how to do it, so we called on help. Cheryl did this, our president did this. She got on to Google and she found Sandy Robb. Sandy Robb is a historian and she became our consultant. She decided that she agreed to come up to Ingham to mentor us and to give us some tutorials in how to do things. Some of us went off, 1 or 2 together went off and photographed all the cemeteries and the burial sites that we knew were in Ingham and tried to locate others. They did locate others, some of them buried under cane paddocks. We gathered all of that information and recorded that. Others went off and interviewed local families, not just Chinese families, but old Australian families who were living amongst the Chinese. And we had stories of young boys pulling watermelons off the back of watermelon trucks, and poor old Chinese gardener went up the hill with his horse and cart, and lots of other stories. The most important one was the discovery of the Book Tea Temple in Halifax. Yes. And so that sent our president off on a real tangent. She really took that up and she traced that down, traced the family, she traced the history of the families that were there. She traced the location, the last known location of the temple sign, and she followed that down to a private collection in Townsville. And we have now located the temple, located the last caretaker, located the original sign, photographed and documented the whole lot.
And we also discovered the dish that came from the temple, and the actual dish, and we were very, very lucky that the person who owned it donated it to us, so that is an artefact that we can actually keep and proudly show off. I think one of the highlights was knowing about the spirit doors. Right, so I took great pride because I was at the gallery for most of the exhibition to see how it goes and everything. And to know that you have the footsteps were going in and you had to stand there, put your right foot over first to enter the temple. And and a lot of people, they would come in and I would tell them that and they said, "Oh, is that right?" So, and they were all doing it and it was really, really good. So, and then you walk through and there's this just amazing room of Chinese. It was just, and you look around and you think, wow, we did this in 14 months. We did all of this and we put all of this together. And it was just incredible.
Congratulations to the Ingham Family History Association and Sandy Robb, and to all the finalists in this category.
Thank you, Andrew, and to all the winners and finalists. It's wonderful to see so many inspiring projects. Congratulations. I'd now like to introduce Katie McConnell to present the final 2 award categories. Katie is the curator of Old Government House, QUT, which has been a GAMAA recipient and a previous host of our awards event.
Thank you, Rebecca. I'm delighted to present the award for engagement organisations with paid staff. The judging panel selected 2 finalists in this category. These were Brisbane City Council for their citywide outdoor gallery augmented reality art treasure hunt, and Logan Art Gallery for our stories and designs. And the winner is Logan Art Gallery for our stories and designs.
This project derives from a Logan City Council call out for expressions of interest for a local Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island artist to submit a design for a mural to be painted in the Chester Park water tower in Barona Heights. This was a great excitement to us because out of these submissions, we discovered a whole group of local artists who we weren't aware of in the past. And it also introduced us to Amanda Heyman, the local First Nations curator. So in order to continue our current program, which is trying to make our exhibitions program reflect as much as possible the cultural diversity of Logan and the Logan region, we were very excited by the idea of getting Amanda to curate an exhibition using all the artists that were submitted expressions of interest to the water tower. The final winner was Cara Magdalene.
Really, the ultimate aim of that project was to build closer and sustainable relationships with local Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander artists, so we could build further exhibition opportunities with those artists in the future.
The project was so lovely to work on. Logan's my hometown, so I grew up there, and I was able to work with 7 beautiful women, female artists, so 7 sisters I call them, and the group kind of came together and really kind of bonded and spoke about place and their journeys. And, you know, the artists have gone on to really connect with each other and support each other as a community as well. So that's been really lovely to see. Kyra Magdalo in particular has won the Emerging Arts Award since. So then the big kind of national Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Art Award. She's now gained representation with a gallery. So that's pretty significant for an artist to advance their career like that. So yeah, and I mean, all the other artists are getting small kind of wins here and there, and it's really great to follow their progress.
Coming back to our, main objective is building long-term and sustainable relationships. We've seen some strong outcomes come from that project, and we were able to build closer, more trusting relationships with those artists, which have subsequently resulted in 2 major solo exhibitions. One that just happened 2 months ago. It was Kyra Magdalo's first major solo exhibition, a really, really powerful show, and it was a real privilege to work with Kyra to develop that exhibition. And our local artist Jessica Ski McKinnon is just planning her first solo exhibition and curatorial debut where she's working with members of her family in a group exhibition and paying tribute to her well-known and respected father, Joseph Skeen, and how artworks and cultural traditions are passed through the family. So that's what that exhibition will focus on next year. And also, additionally to that, too many to list here, but there's been really amazing public art outcomes as well. From having those close relationships with the artists, we're able to support and connect, private and local government initiatives who are looking for local Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders for public art commissions. So a lot of the artists have been participating in the project, have been successful in those commissions, so spreading the stories and designs across the city itself.
Congratulations again to Logan Art Gallery. There were no nominations received for the category of engagement by organisations volunteer run. So we move on to our final category for the evening. In the sustainability category, no nominations were received for volunteer-run organisations this year. However, for organisations with paid staff, the judging panel chose to shortlist one finalist in this category, and the winner is Australian Age of Dinosaurs for its projects Our Past, Your Museum, building a sustainable museum of natural history in outback Queensland.
The forward planning carried out by the museum that qualifies it under the category of sustainability has been the development of the museum's bankable feasibility study for stage 3.3, the Museum of Natural History. As the museum begins to prepare for its final and most challenging stage of development, the construction of a multi-million-dollar Museum of Natural History, a bankable feasibility study was undertaken and completed in December 2020. Compiled by internationally recognised consultancy firm Grant Thornton Australia in consultation with the museum management team, the bankable feasibility study includes a detailed qualitative and quantitative assessment of the Museum of Natural History, a detailed funding strategy for construction, along with the economic, social and financial impacts of the project on the surrounding communities. Most importantly, the bankable feasibility study confirms the museum's growing from within strategy has played a huge role leading up to the Museum of Natural History. The bankable feasibility study recognises the success of the strategy and the commitment and ability of the museum to build and operate the Museum of Natural History. The support of state and regional governments toward future planning, coupled with their recognition of the museum's ability to effectively utilise resources to build the museum, reinforce its long-term feasibility and prove that a Museum of Natural History is not only necessary, but viable. The abiding objective of the bankable feasibility study is to ensure effective planning is undertaken to preserve and promote Australia's geological past while securing the long-term sustainability of communities throughout regional Australia. The title of this nomination, Our Past, Your Museum, embodies this final stage of the museum's development, an Australian Age of Dinosaurs Museum of Natural History for all.
Congratulations to Australian Age of Dinosaurs.
Thank you, Katie and Andrew. We really appreciate you being part of tonight's awards. On behalf of Museums and Galleries Queensland, I would like to acknowledge everyone who has contributed to the success of the 2021 Gallery and Museum Achievement Awards. So much of the work that we do at Museums and Galleries Queensland is delivered with the wonderful support and collaboration of our industry partners, for which we extend our sincere thanks and appreciation. We know that the last 2 years have been difficult for everyone. As the peak body for Queensland's Museum and Galleries, we acknowledge the tremendous job that all of you in the sector do each and every day. Sincere thanks to Museums and Gallery Queensland's amazing team for their hard work throughout the year and making events like tonight possible. My special thanks to Deb Beattie, Leisha Walker, Prue McComish and Melissa Fletcher for their extraordinary efforts in delivering this year's GAMAA. We thank everyone who nominated for this year's awards and encourage you to nominate again next year. Details of all the winners and finalists and their projects are on Museums and Galleries Queensland's website, and a recording of tonight's event will also be posted to the website soon. That concludes our 2021 Gallery and Museum Achievement Awards. Congratulations once again to this year's recipients, and thanks to all of you for being part of this year's virtual awards presentation. We hope to see you in person in 2022. Thank you.